where we dig and go beyond the headlines for informed analysis of major political stories in Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Dangote Petroleum Refinery reduces its ex-depot loading cost of petrol to 865 naira per litre. Tonight, we turn our attention to the resurgent insecurity in Benue, Borno and Plateau states as we discuss the cause and effect while finding lasting solution for peace. My guest tonight is the CEO, Beacon Consulting Limited, Kabir Adamu. Welcome to Politics Tonight, everyone. Stay with us. I'll be right back. Welcome back and thank you very much for staying with us. Now let's begin with some political developments. The Dangote Petroleum Refinery and Petrochemicals has reviewed its ex-depot loading cost of petrol, bringing it down to 865 naira per litre. According to reports, the refinery informed its marketers and customers of the new price earlier today. Affiliated stations with special agreements with the refinery are expected to adjust the pump prices to around 910 naira, down from about 925 naira, in line with a slight reduction. This price cut follows a high-level meeting between representatives of the Dangote refinery and the Minister of Finance, Wale Edo, on Tuesday. Following the meeting, the federal government reaffirmed that the Naira for Crude initiative remains in effect. The policy, which allows local refineries to purchase crude oil in Naira, was described as a key directive aimed at supporting sustainable local refining. The move is expected to ease pump prices and boost petrol availability in the local markets. The 2025 annual flood outlook identifies over 1,000 communities in high flood risk areas and over 2,000 in moderate flood risk areas across various states. At the public presentation of the annual flood outlook in Abuja, Minister of Water Resources Joseph Utuev emphasized the importance of flood management and community preparedness. Senior reporter Abid Lawal reports.
The Federal Ministry of Water Resources and Sanitation.
The federal government is harnessing the power of local knowledge and technology through innovative community-based forecasting initiatives. These programs are designed to improve preparedness and response strategies for flooding, a growing concern as climate change intensifies weather patterns. A total of 31 states have been identified as high flood risk areas. Minister of Water Resources Joseph Utuev says it is crucial for communities within these regions to take proactive measures.
Moderate impact floods are expected in 445 communities in 116 local government areas in 24 states for the months of April, May, and June, and 1,458 communities in 271 local government areas fall within the months of July, August, and September.
The hydrological agency saddled with the responsibility of forecast has come up with interventions for reducing the impact of flood disaster on most vulnerable communities. It noted that collaboration is vital in these efforts.
Strengthen resilience of the communities and provide policymakers and disaster risk managers with timely, precise, and actionable flood risk information.
We are working with NISA and some other agencies on anticipatory action on floods, and we know that this year things are going to be different. We are going to be holding simulation exercises from decision makers all the way down to the local governments.
With the climate crisis already a reality, the focus on community-based initiatives reflects a shift towards empowering residents to take control of their safety and future. As Nigeria braces for the 2025 rainy season, authorities are urging state governments, local councils, and at-risk communities to act on the forecast insights, strengthen disaster preparedness plans, and participate in national programs designed to reduce vulnerability and save lives. Habida Lawal, TVC News, Abuja.
The Irregular Warfare Center in the National Defense College has convened a forum to review the impact of joint task force security operations across the country. There are at least 8 of such operations nationwide, but there are concerns about its effectiveness. Simon Delftin reports.
The Irregular Warfare Center at the National Defense College in February conducted a field study to ascertain the socio-economic impact of the Joint Task Force security operations in the areas where they are ongoing. The commandant of the college, Rear Admiral Olumuyiwa Olotu, says it has become necessary to close the gaps, especially in the areas of irregular and hybrid theft.
These field researches in the areas of operation of the various joint task forces in the country was informed by the need to identify the impacts of the joint task force operations on the socio-economic and political development in their areas of responsibility. This is consistent with the mandate of the college to undertake research in pursuit of its mandate as a center of excellence in research and training at the strategic level.
The evolving security situation presents challenges to security forces. The emerging situation demands the adoption of new strategies.
You have gone beyond barracks and battlefields to listen to the silent cries of communities, to study the ripple effects of conflict, and to chart a path for both security and development. This is the kind of thinking, strategic, inclusive, and forward-looking, that will define the battles of the future and determine whether nations merely survive or truly thrive.
This forum is optimistic that findings from the field study will go a long way for security forces involved in joint task force operations. It's unclear what adjustments would be made at the end of the day, but one thing is certain: the country is scaling up efforts to curb insecurity. Sifon Essien, TVC News, Abuja.
Let's take a short break, and when we return, we shall be discussing insecurity in Benue, Borno, and Plateau states. Please stay with us, everyone.
Every major news story is with Benue perspective and layered with different levels of impact.
Hello. What on news?
First, with breaking news.
Every weekday on Business Nigeria, we uncover the secrets of the financial world.
We analyze the stock market, shares, bonds, and the thrilling world of cryptocurrency.
Facts matter. Our team dives deep to separate fact from popular opinion.
We simplify complex government policies as it impacts your everyday life, helping you navigate the ever-changing financial landscape.
Watch Business Nigeria every weekday at 2 p.m. only on TVC News. First with breaking news.
Information is power. Information is security. Information is knowledge. On Labor Lens, we believe that working people around the world have real questions of their own. They want to know how the world of work operates, what it means to the employer of labor, how policies affect workers in the workplace. On Labor Lens, I ensure we engage effectively the organized labor, organized private sector, and government to get out of them information workers are in need of. I am Sharon Ijason, asking questions that make you get sense of the workplace.
Welcome back, everyone. Borno states in the northeast, Benue and Plateau states in the north central have been scattered by insecurity at the hands of jihadist group Boko Haram, ISWAP, and suspected herders. In Borno State, the governor Babagana Zulum raised the alarm over resurgence of terrorist tactics. Fighters staged a series of attacks and seized control of some parts of the state. Meanwhile, in Benue, bodies identified as civil protection guards were ambushed and killed by suspected herders was discovered in Gwa West local government. And finally, in Plateau State, precisely Boko's local government, many people were killed, including women and children. In a bid to restore peace and security, the Inspector General of Police, Kaidi Agbetokun, ordered immediate deployment of police tactical assets to the affected states. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Olufemi Oluyede, also assured of more troops into the state during a personal visit to Mango Council area of Plateau State. But what does all of these say about the state of insecurity in our country? Are the governors who are the chief security officers of your state helpless? Again, in situations like this, the call for state police comes to fore. But to help us understand the situation tonight is the CEO Beacon Consulting Limited, Dr. Kabir Adamu. Good evening, Dr. Adamu. Thank you very much for joining us on Politics Tonight.
My pleasure. Good evening.
Good evening to you. So you heard my introduction. What exactly is happening?
We just published our March 2025 Nigeria Security Report, which is an analysis of security trends that have occurred within the month of March. And I think it would be a good place to kind of give us a broad overview of what is happening. And then I can narrow down to the three things that you mentioned in your report. So from that broad sense of view, what we saw in March 2025 is that 1,300 persons died, unfortunately, within that month, which is an increase from the figure that we had for February 2025. In the case of abduction, 806 persons died, which is a decrease from the figure that we had in February 2025. And then when we broke that down to the various regions that we have in Nigeria, we saw that the Northwest had the highest figure for fatalities, which was 38%, and then they followed by the Northeast, which was 34% of the 1,300 persons, and then followed by the southern, North Central and the 3,000 regions, which had about 10%. For abduction, the Northwest had the highest percent, which is 58% of the 806 that we recorded, followed by the North Central, which had 18.7%, and then followed by the North East, which had 13.28%. And then the southern regions, the three of them together, had about 9% thereabout. In terms of the distribution, according to the states, Zamfara State came highest with 208 persons abducted in the month of March, followed by Katsina, Borno, down to Niger, and then the other states. In terms of fatalities, Niger State had the highest with 368, followed by Zamfara, and then Borno State, and then, of course, the others would be Kebbi, Katsina, down to Benue, and then, of course, Sokoto State. So this is kind of a broad overview. Now, if we narrow it down to the three states that you mentioned in your report, what we saw, starting from Borno State, what we saw in Borno State is a resurgence of attacks by the two active terrorist groups that are present in Borno State. So you have the Islamic State in West Africa province. We saw 6 major attacks carried out by that group. And interestingly, before those attacks, it released statements. The bigger group, Islamic State, released statements which it published on its magazine, urging its members to carry out attacks. And then all of a sudden, we started seeing those attacks on our military formations. So at the moment, about 3 local governments are being challenged in terms of they are not being controlled by these terrorist groups, but they are constantly being challenged in terms of the control by our security forces and the state administration, as it were. Then when we moved down to Benue State, we saw...
Dr. Adamu, let's stay with Borno State before we move to Benue State and Plateau State. Because, I mean, for Borno State, we thought violent attacks of this nature had been de-escalated. So would you say this is a major setback?
It is a major setback, unfortunately. And this is in no way belittling the effort of the military and the government as a whole. It is just unfortunate that the oxygen that allows these groups to thrive, and that's their ability to recruit, their ability to gain funding from the different things that they do, as well as their ability to acquire weapons. As a country, we have not done very well in stopping these three things, even though we have the instruments that should have allowed us to stop this, but the implementation of those instruments have not been very active. So even though we're killing a significant number of their commanders, and we're seeing over 100,000 of the members and their families surrendering to the authorities, but because of these 3 things I've mentioned, you see occasional resurgence like the type that we're seeing at the moment. And I remember I said that the international body, IS, is also issuing statements where it's actually encouraging more attacks. And so we're not just dealing with a Nigerian problem, we're dealing with an international problem. And because of the frequency of the activities of these groups within the Sahel region, and because of the porosity of our borders, and add to it the political complexities, the exit of Niger, as it were, from the multinational joint task force, the fact that Chad is also, unfortunately, we're not sure of its commitment at the moment. So all of this is adding to that complexity that led to the insurgence that we're seeing at the moment. Another factor, which is something we're currently studying, is the possibility that the Nigerian military's concentration in the northeast has been reduced as a result of the new frontier of operation that has opened up in the northwest at the moment. Remember that there is a new operation in the northwest, which is Operation Fansanyama, and a significant percentage of the assets of the Nigerian military has moved to that operation. Add that to the ongoing operations in the Niger Delta against oil theft. So we're dealing with a situation where the Nigerian military is focused on different fronts. And so the likelihood of occasional letdowns in some fronts is a possibility, sadly.
All right, just as you said, Dr. Adamu, this is a major setback for Borno State and by extension, the Northeast in general, and calls for serious action, rightfully stated by the governor. Borno State kicked off the year with harrowing experiences from armed criminal groups who continue to pose a threat to the region. And I remember that in January, the statement released by Major General Edward Buba indicated that the terrorists had attempted to surprise troops and retaliated the recent killing of their commander and combatants by troops. I don't know if you remember that. Also, battle damage assessments revealed several killed terrorists and recovered weapons troops. Reinforcement team also encountered improvised explosive devices, injuring the vigilante commander. The air component of Operation Hardin K conducted air interdiction on the fleeing terrorists. What's your evaluation of the current state of Nigeria's defense capabilities? And what specific measures are you advocating to enhance the effectiveness and efficiency of our security forces?
So I believe we have a competent and capable military force. I also believe that the military force is doing its best. It's dealing with multifaceted, complex challenges. In some instances, it's having to play catch-up. As an example, the nature of the insurgency and modern, methodology of attack by the non-state armed groups is something that it had to learn how to adapt. It was used to, traditional warfare where the enemy was on the one side, and then you have the forces on the other side. So it was easy, who the enemy is. But now with asymmetric warfare.
Dr. Adamu, are you there? Dr. Adamu, if you can hear me, we'll come back to this broad report by Beacon Consulting Limited in a moment. But in analyzing these recent spate of attacks in Borno State, is there a possibility that the recent closure of all official displacement camps in Maiduguri may have led to this fresh wave of violence? Politics tonight, everyone. Thank you very much for staying with us on the program. Dr. Kabir Adamu, CEO Beacon Consulting Limited, is my guest tonight, helping us get some perspectives on the recent spate of attacks on the Plateau, Benue, and Borno states. Dr. Adamu, thank you very much for staying with us. So before we lost connection with you, I was asking you this very fundamental question, because in analyzing this recent spate of attacks in Borno State, is there a possibility that the recent closure of all official displacement camps in Maiduguri may have led to this fresh wave of violence? Because as at the time the report surfaced, some residents of the state saying the forceful relocations have also been faulted for the lack of consultation with development organizations, human rights groups. Critics argue that the plan has so far been focused more on the dream of economic revitalization rather than protecting the rights and well-being of IDPs. And I'm here wondering how serious that is and could have contributed to this fresh wave of attacks.
Yeah, so before technology interrupted our conversation, I was making the point that our military were competent, but I was also making the point that there are other factors, and I was talking about the geopolitical component. There is a lot of international and foreign influence in the counterterrorism as well as the terrorism operation. So discussing IDP camps, the closure of IDP camps and resettlement by the governor, that issue has generated a lot of discussions and controversies. And the state government is very clear about its intention. It has explained why It wants to close all IDP camps and resettle populations. And it has engaged with our international partners to explain to them. I know not all of them supported the state government, but for God's sake, it's our country. And this is what the state deemed is best for its people. It has generated adequate engagement and has gotten the support of the majority of the people in that regard. So the onus is on us to support that objective. And any detractor, and in this instance, I believe there are several detractors, including the two major groups, terrorist groups that are active in the Northeast, the Jamaat al-Ahl Sunnah al-Dawati wal-Jihad and the Islamic State in West Africa province. They wouldn't want that resettlement, and I'll explain why. There are strategic locations in the state. Those locations are strategic. For the military, they're strategic because they allow the military to carry out, to control certain locations and then carry out operations. It allows them to enable reinforcement and several other reasons why they are strategic for the military. There are also strategic reasons for the state, but then there are also strategic reasons for the bad guys. So as an example, access to the two major forests, Sambisa and then the Alagano forest, access to the border communities. They wouldn't want people to return to those locations. They will frustrate everything the government wants to do to return to that. So are we going to allow them, or are we going to now bring our national force together to support the state government, allow the resettlement, and then deal with whoever it is that wants to stop it? Let's not forget that there are foreign actors too who may not want that resettlement because of the strategic objectives that they're trying to achieve in that region. So I do understand all of this could be factors why we're seeing the resurgence, but the bottom line is that the groups that are behind the resurgence are being engineered, and that engineering is happening through statements coming from abroad. And I've mentioned that. We've monitored those statements, one in January, the other one in March. And we immediately after the statements, we saw a resurgence of those attacks. So what am I trying to say? Our counter-terrorism operation, and earlier on, I did mention to you that we have 3 instruments. Those instruments, when they were created, the idea was to have an all-of-government approach and an all-of-society approach. It wasn't meant to be a military approach alone. So in this instance, why don't we encourage local participation, especially in intelligence gathering and in resilience building, recruitment? If we build our de-radicalization and counter-radicalization component of those 3 instruments, it will be very difficult for those groups to recruit. But for some reasons, we're focusing more on the military approach and not giving emphasis to these other components contained in the instruments. Going forward, you asked me what ways. Let's emphasize the components of the 3 instruments that we have, so that the oxygen that allows the 2 groups to grow and to remain as resilient as they are, we can suffocate them, and then they would have a natural death very, very soon. But for as long as we don't do that, no matter the number of commanders that kill, we're likely to see the type of resurgence that we're seeing at the moment.
All right, Dr. Adamu, but would you say the situation in Borno State is very different from what we have on the Plateau and in Benue State?
In some instances, frankly, no. We're dealing with non-state armed groups who have shown the capacity to challenge the supremacy of the use of force by the state. The same thing is happening in Borno State. It's the same thing that is happening in Benue. It's the same thing that is happening in Plateau State. They're all non-state armed groups. Their dimensions are different. The methodology is slightly different, but the consequence is the same. They are challenging the supremacy of the use of force by the state. And I hate to say this, they are doing it successfully. Yes. And the more they do it successfully, the more they encourage other groups to continue. So to that extent, we're dealing with the same thing. Unless the state grows its capacity to reduce the ability of these non-state armed groups to challenge its supremacy of the use of force, then unfortunately, we're going to see more of such challenges.
Very sad to see that the killings on the Plateau have now become a norm, and the North Central region is now very unstable. But for Plateau State, the governor has called it ethnic cleansing. It calls it genocide. It says these are the activities of land grabbers. It says there are powerful persons responsible. And I must confess that scares me a lot to hear that allegedly there are some powerful persons somewhere sponsoring or funding violent attacks and deaths on poor Nigerians. Is this something you agree with? Because in your report, you say these killings reflected a pattern of ethnic-based violence, inflaming herder farmer tensions.
Yes, to an extent, I do agree that a significant portion of the conflict in Plateau State is ethnic-based. It is also resource-based. But where I differ with His Excellency, the Governor, is the response of both the federal government and the state government. There are two major operations that are in place in Plateau State. Each of them is 15 years old. And so they are not babies, teenagers actually. Okay. And we have not subjected any of them to democratic oversight till date. One is Operation Safe Haven, which was created in 2010, and 2025, that makes it 15 years. It's expanded, and nobody has told us, as an example, what is the end game? What is the exit strategy of that operation? It was meant to be a stopgap operation. Now it has become embedded within the ecospace of Plateau State. The second one is Operation Rainbow, which is a state-based operation with several security forces involved. It has also become embedded within the ecospace of Plateau State. And sadly, in spite of these two operations, you still have non-state actors coming to the state and killing people in a manner that is annoying, that is embarrassing. Because, I mean, these people, from what we hear, come on motorbikes. And I challenge His Excellency, the Governor, give me the ability to support that state in 3 months and put in place a surveillance mechanism. We're not talking of ants. Even if there are ants, 80 ants together, you should be able to have the capability, a surveillance capability that can pick up 80 ants moving together. So to that extent, I believe that the state government can do better in arming, having a structure, a state-level security structure that would limit the ability of these groups to operate. And just to buttress my point, I recommend to His Excellency, the Governor, let him take a visit to his colleague in Lagos and sit down with his colleague in Lagos, just a day or even half a day, and tell his colleague in Lagos, please, I would like to study what you have in place in terms of the structures, state-level structures, now not federal-level structures, for managing security. Let me just give you an example. You are in Lagos State. Your colleagues have covered the activities of the Command and Control Center in Lagos State. I doubt if we have anything near that in Plateau State. Yet the challenges in Plateau State are bigger than the challenges in Lagos. So this is the point I'm making. We know the enemy. Nobody is in doubt about who the enemy is. For the past 15 years, since Operation Safe Haven and Operation Rainbow have been in place in Plateau State, enemy is known. What we have stopped and we haven't done as a country is to deal a death blow to that enemy. And it can be done if the state government can create structures for public security to support the federal structures, if we can enhance civilian oversight on the existing security operations and sit down and ask critical questions. I mentioned as an example, what is the exit strategy for these operations? How are they being managed? The funding for them, what are they being used for? How come we still have this enemy able to come in, kill people, and then leave? And Absolutely. Not one person has been arrested. Not one motorcycle has been arrested. I mean, for God's sake, motorcycles cannot be buried under the sand. They move. And then in today's world, believe me, and I say this with all sense of responsibility, you put 10 kids who have GIS capabilities. I repeat, 10 kids with GIS capabilities. They can use the heat wave of those motorcycles to tell you where they emanated from and where they went to. So what are we talking about? When I hear the governor speak about, genocide and all of that, I see a shaking of responsibility. I see a wrong person. I want to see our leaders taking up responsibility and dealing with the problem. We elected them to deal with the problem, not to give excuses for X, Y, Z. And this also, to an extent, goes to the federal government. This issue is known. Nobody is in doubt about the issue. And we need someone to deal with it. We've elected representatives to deal with it. And I would want to see a situation where they deal with it.
Thank you for going there, Dr. Adamu, because it's interesting to hear you advocate for a review of these operations, particularly Operation Rainbow, because I remember when Governor Mothwang assumed power, he promised to rejuvenate the security network. But has there really been any changes since then? Would you say, can we categorically say these local security outfit is well equipped to cater to the security needs of the people of Plateau State? But also, let me ask you, is it possible that there is a terrorist enclave within these communities that perhaps the state government isn't aware of or difficult to locate?
The first part of your question on whether the state level security platforms are adequately equipped, the answer is no. I believe that they are not adequately equipped. I've given you an example. The Lagos platforms, I doubt if we have anything near that in Plateau State. The structures have been created. He has, persons he has appointed with responsibility for security. There are operations in place, but that's political. The structure that would allow these appointments to operate would need to be implemented. I gave you the example of a command and control center. In Lagos State, as an example, in one room, in the TVC, the Command and Control Center, you have up to 50 computers with young persons manning those computers, telecenters with distress call capabilities that are functional, and you can try it. You're in Lagos, but do those things exist in Plateau State? So you can't perform, out of nothing. You have to create the structures. You have to allow the persons you've appointed. Plateau State has peace commissions, but I doubt if those peace commissions are being funded adequately. We've had a previous governor who came on air and apologized on behalf of the atrocities that were committed previously. But then since then, what has happened? Peace building is a process. It has to be invested in.
And there is also a peace building agency in Plateau State.
Yeah, exactly. So there are several structures that have been created, but my point is those structures are not adequately funded, and they do not have the structure, the support systems to allow them to function properly. When you create such a commission, there are several ingredients. Let me give you another example: the early warning systems and early response systems. These are all part of a public security system. If the state is serious about investing in security, it's not about buying vehicles. It's not about buying motorcycles. It's not about buying Dane guns and giving it to state-level security structures. It's about creating these different levels. At the last count, I'm a consultant. I don't want to give everything on here. At the last count, there are 6 structures that would need to be created to have an adequate state-level security structure. So again, I've given a tip. He can go to Lagos, sit with his colleague, and ask critical questions around how is Lagos doing it. Lagos is more of a metropolitan center, has more urban challenges, but yet you don't have the kind of threats that you have in Plateau State. Yes, the geography is different, the topography is different, and so you need a different kind of systems in terms of the hardware to manage, especially surveillance as an example. But
Dr. Adamo, are you there? So earlier you highlighted the importance of community engagement, the role of traditional institutions, religious leaders, community elders. The youths cannot be overemphasized in maintaining peace and security on the plateau. But let's talk about local saboteurs. Because the governor had insinuated that when the security personnel arrest some suspects, they end up being released after arrest. All right, you may answer the question when we come back from this break. Stay with us, everyone.